Hello, everyone. I wanted to introduce you to one of my team members at Align PT. And she's more than one of my team members. For me, she teaches yoga and she's a personal trainer and she also teaches fitness classes. But Martha Walker has a lot to offer her clients. And she's someone that I've worked with personally for my own issues. And so I wanted to just welcome you, Martha Walker. And um, I want to start out by just asking you, you have quite a variety of experience in your professional training and certifications. How would you define what it is that you do professionally?
That is such a good question because it's been hard for me to answer that. And I have taken up the name of wellness coach to try to encompass everything that you've just said, that I do nutrition counseling, but also I have this fitness yoga side. And also I teach meditation. So wellness coach is my official title, which just means that I love to help clients with all aspects of their health.
So your business is called Eat, Sleep, Play, Meditate, correct?
That's right.
Tell me a little bit about that.
So when I first got started, I was really focused on those four areas as the four pillars of health, let's say. So in order to be a fully whole person and healthy person, I felt like I needed to have my eye on all of those balls. How I'm eating, play represents fitness and how I'm moving, sleeping being a huge part of that. And then also I feel very strongly about having a meditation practice for myself, and I try to encourage it with my clients.
Awesome. So when I think about, I'm excited about talking to you in in this month because we're talking about defining self care. And for me, when I thought about who am I going to talk to about self care, you were like the first person in my mind because I felt like you're so good at taking care of yourself. Like I really admire the way that you are able to set boundaries for yourself, like knowing that, you're not going to um you're not going to overcommit yourself, or you try not to. I'm sure that you probably struggle with that, but
Mhm.
you seem like you're really highly aware of not overcommitting to things. And um it appears to me, just from what I know of you, that you really do. You eat well, and I know when I'm out, you know at a function with you, that you're very disciplined about what you eat.
Mhm.
And you're very disciplined about taking care of yourself. And the other thing that I really love was that you were able to help me find that for myself. Like, just like a simple question of like, okay, well, when are you going to find time to exercise? And we went through our days, and I was like, well, Fridays I start early. I start at 8:30 or 8 o'clock in the morning. And you were like, well, you own your own business. Who
Why
decided
are
that?
you doing that? Right.
So I was like, duh, like, yeah, you were able to help me to find that time for myself as well. So this isn't really a question. It's just kind of, um, I think it's just, I think just you're just the perfect person to talk to about self-care as far as that goes. So and we'll touch upon that. But if there's anything you want to say about that right now, go ahead and say it, because then I have other questions. But I just wanted to kind of tell our audience, our viewers, why I chose you as the person to talk to about self-care.
Well, a couple of things came to mind as you were saying that. The first thing is I'm glad it looks like I have it figured out, because there is some struggle that happens. Sometimes I have guilt about the time that I set aside for self care, because I have what we call the full catastrophe life, meaning that I'm a working mom with a family and outside responsibilities. So sometimes there's some guilt with me setting time aside for myself. The other thing that I think is a blessing, when you're going through a period of chronic illness, you look for things that could be a blessing. Like, how am I going to turn this 8-year struggle with Lyme disease and other things into a blessing? And I think I learned self care because I had to, because there was a time when I was sick enough that I just couldn't do what I was used to doing. And so I really had to protect my time and my energy each week. And that was a great teacher.
Absolutely. And then that kind of leads me into my next question, which was a really good segue, is that you were not always doing this. Like this is a how long have you been doing this? And tell me about your previous life, because it's always hard. It's always interesting for me to think about you in this other life because you're so good at what you do right now
Yeah, yeah.
that yeah. So just go ahead and tell me about your journey into this kind of lifestyle and all of that stuff.
So I made a break in 2013. I quit my corporate job at IBM and went back to school for nutrition. And so I did nutrition first and then personal training, and yoga and the other things just kind of came along with it. But prior to that, I have a master's in international business. And so I worked for IBM for 15 years. And toward the tail end of that, from let's say 2003 to 2012, was when I started getting sick with migraines and headaches and all sorts of maladies. And then in 2008, I was diagnosed with Lyme, and I was in treatment for 4 years from '08 to 12. And then after I came through my Lyme treatment, I had taken so many antibiotics that I wanted to go back to nutrition school to figure out how I was going to heal my gut. And it just led me where I am now, with feeling really passionately about trying to help others with what I'd learned.
Yeah, that's amazing. And so um during this process, I'm sure it was probably I just know from the clients that I work with that have all kinds of autoimmune stuff and Lyme and things like that. It's a journey. It's like up and down and you have this sense of like um not feeling like it's ever going to get better. Would that be
Yeah,
kind of a correct assessment? Like, you just kind of
definitely.
feel like, you're just like, can I ever eat normal food? Can I ever do, have a fulfilling life? And
Yeah,
it can feel, um, it can kind of,
hopeless.
yeah, can you
I,
speak, maybe speak
yeah,
to that?
I think hopeless is a word that I hear a lot. I mean, I do see a lot of clients now with autoimmune issues and with Lyme. And I say this with a lot of humility, that if I could be an expander for somebody else who's going through Lyme treatment and may not feel like that there's ever going to be an end to it, then I would love for that to also be something that comes out of my experience. If you don't know a lot about Lyme, it's something that a lot of doctors feel like you don't ever get over. So just me saying that I feel like I'm over it is a very controversial thing to say, but I have good reason for saying it. So yes, it can feel very hopeless, and it takes so long for a diagnosis. It took me 8 years to get a diagnosis, and in the meantime I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, um, fibromyalgia, all sorts of things. And each time I was like, sure, that's it, whatever. I was so ready for a diagnosis that I was willing to believe anything, because the scariest thing was nobody knowing what was wrong with me. Or, I have a real chip on my shoulder when people say that it's stress. I heard that a lot too. Oh, you're a young working mom, you have this corporate job, it's just stress.
Right. Well, so I know that stress, though. Let's talk about that because stress is a big exacerbator and it could be a cause of a lot of issues, right? The nervous system, the vagus nerve, and I notice that when my clients, for instance, that have chronic pain or abdominal issues go on vacation and they're like completely relaxed on their vacation, they come back like, my clients that have SIBO, come back and they're like, my gut was great and I feel great. And so, and it takes a little bit of time for them to integrate back into their lives. And then all of a sudden their symptoms come back. So I do feel like it's not just stress, right? We can't
Right.
just say it's just stress because those symptoms are real, but they are like, what are your thoughts about that? Does the stress, in your opinion, exacerbate the symptoms?
It definitely did, and I definitely experienced the same thing, where I would go on vacation. We would go back home to North Carolina for extended periods, and I would be able to eat foods on vacation that I hadn't been able to eat in my normal life, because I think my gut was in a better place because of lack of stress. It just is my story that stress wasn't the root cause.
Right.
So that's why I made that comment about I'm a little sensitive to it, because people kind of I allowed for people to make me think I was crazy for making up these symptoms. So I think it's important to speak to that,
Mhm.
At the same time, obviously, I got into meditation while I was doing my Lyme treatment because I understood how important my stress was to the whole picture.
Completely. Yeah. And yeah, I don't like saying it's just stress because it's not just stress. It's very complex,
Right.
right? There's lots of different body um regions of our bodies, right? The nervous system, the digestive system, the, urogenital system, like the skeletal system, the muscular system, the fascial system. There's a lot of things at play. So I love I it's really interesting. I want to talk to you about your biofeedback. Biofeedback. I know it's not biofeedback, but for
Right.
lack of a better word, like, would you describe kind of how because I think it's really fascinating how you approach treatment with your clients. And I know that's just one piece of it, right? There's more to it than that. But I think the people that I've referred to you, and the people, and myself included, and my husband, and the people in my life that have seen you that have gotten some really good results, um, just kind of describe how you help people with their issues.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It is a type of biofeedback. And if you wanted to Google it, you could Google electrodermal screening, EDS, and it's a type of a biofeedback system. There's a computer interface. So if you were to come see me for this type of biofeedback, we would be sitting across the desk from each other, and there's a computer in between us. And by holding a probe in one hand and then I'm just touching a probe to your other hand, it allows us to get an energetic reading through your skin of what pathogens might be alive in your system. I certainly do a lot of food sensitivity testing, and it gives a red, yellow, green score. So for something like blue cheese, for example, it would be able to tell us how your body reacts when you eat something like blue cheese. And so I've got a couple of assumptions that I'm working with when I do biofeedback on clients, especially for people who come in with food sensitivity testing. I really have this working theory that there's probably something in your gut that could be out of balance. And so we would look for pathogens that might be making you reactive to foods. Like, I'll just use candida because it's one that we hear a lot about in the media. And the other thing is, it's not uncommon for people to have 4 or 5 different types of pathogens, uh, a bad type of a negative pathogen living in our gut. If we can figure out what the primary root cause, what the highest level of pathogen is, sometimes the others just drop away. If we can give our immune system that break from the highest priority, some of the other ones, like parasites, might choose to coexist in our gut with no problems if we could prioritize whatever your top priority is.
It's just so fascinating. Um,
Well, and one other thing I want to say is the way that I got into it was when I was in my Lyme treatment. I took short-term disability from IBM when I was doing IV antibiotics, and my Lyme literate doctor in Denver. Sometimes I would go back. I saw him every 2 months because every 2 months we had to rotate my treatment. And sometimes the medicine he gave me would make me sicker than other times. And I used to always talk to him about, why are some months better than others? And he said, well, I don't know, but there's this woman who does this thing in Littleton. And every time after you see me, I want you to take the medication to her, and she's going to put it on this biofeedback plate, and she'll be able to tell you how it's going to make you feel. And so I went to see her in Littleton every week for almost 8 years. And then she moved to North Carolina, where I'm from, and I bought into the business because I could tell it was going to revolutionize my nutrition business. And that's the same type of biofeedback that I do now. So I have a very personal story with it. I really think it's what helped me get out of Lyme disease with great treatment, and then treat all the other lesser priorities once Lyme was over.
so your doctor recommended that checking in with. That's really cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Was he an MD or a naturopath or?
He's an osteopath. So for those in the Lyme world, it's Sean Naylor in Denver.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very cool. Okay, so I'm looking at my notes here. This month, obviously, our topic is about defining self-care. And I talked about this in my first Thursday Thrive video about the idea of self-care as healthcare.
Mm-hmm.
as a new paradigm in thinking about self-care, right? Because I think that, a lot of times we get the idea that self-care is something that's extraneous and, frivolous, and that we don't necessarily need self-care, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, what are your thoughts about this, and how do you help your clients embrace this philosophy? If you agree with it, or if you have a different take on it, I'd love to get your take on this philosophy of mine that self-care is healthcare.
Well, I really do agree with it. I think you'd be shocked if I said no. um, for me, one thing that I've struggled with a lot is I got this idea that self care was just a spa day. And I don't know if that resonates with anybody out there. Like, when I think self care, I think of like myself in a bubble bath. And by the way, I do like bathing, so that works for me. But I do this manifestation work with this group called To Be Magnetic. So I just have to say that I got this idea from them. But one of the things they said is to identify what your self care should be. Could you write out a list of the things that you enjoy doing in your spare time when you're procrastinating? So let me say it this way. If I knew that I had to clean my baseboards today, but I was procrastinating, what would I do in the meantime while I was procrastinating? So that idea made a lot of sense to me. Like, what would my Google search show you that I'm passionate about? And for me, when I did this like 6 months ago, I'm so thankful that it came up the way it did, because my, sort of core values for self-care were food. And that's great because I'm in the nutrition business.
Mhm.
Food, um, sort of improving my immune system as a part of self-care. Movement, I'm very passionate about different ways to move, and meditation. And maybe that is very aligned with sort of that spa day idea of self-care. But on the other hand, I have friends who've done this, and their core values for self-care were being outdoors or having a phone call with family. So I just want to say, I think it's really important to not think that self-care is synonymous with a spa day. If that's a core value of yours, it could be dry brushing or taking a bath, but it could also be bigger than that. It could just be what is going to bring you into balance for whatever it is that you do in your life. What recharges you? What do you consider not work? What's fun? What do you feel passionate about? What do you talk about most of the time? What interests you? So that's really important for me. And the other thing is, because I see a lot of people who suffer from chronic illness, I see the opposite too, where people are sick of self care. In other words, I thought of this example while I was prepping for the call. This is not the client's name, but we're going to call her Katie. I have this client who, the first time she came to me, she said, I hope you're not going to give me any more self care things to do, because I really don't have time for the rest of my life because I'm doing so much self care. I said, okay, well, let's talk a little bit about what you're doing. And, she said she gets up, she spends 2 hours doing yoga, dry brushing, oil pulling, journaling, meditating. And all those things can be self care. But the point is that for her, they weren't resonating. She's not passionate about those things. She did them because she read about it in a magazine, or she'd had a practitioner told her to do it, but maybe dry brushing isn't the best fit for her. And either way, she felt so bogged down by the time she has to spend that it was actually becoming the opposite of self-care. So in that, I always think of things like, how can we be most in balance? So when I talked to her for the first time, I said, I think what's going to bring you into balance is taking away self-care. You actually just need some free time, where, unstructured free time. So I think that's a really important point too, because we often, if we know somebody who's had success with something, I myself could start doing that thing without really noticing, but is that right for me? Is that going to bring me into balance? It's sort of like, I don't need to take a B vitamin if I'm not deficient in B vitamins. We shouldn't just do a thing because it worked for somebody else. I think it would be great if we could get to a deeper level of analysis than that.
Completely. I agree with that. That's interesting. I was like just thinking about my Google searches and what I do when I'm
You want to
procrastinating.
tell us, Michele, what do you spend your time searching?
It's so a lot of times it's like I'm researching things for my business and stuff like that. But sometimes it's like I go off on I love so I'm going to talk to you a little bit about this because it's interesting that kind of sparked some stuff for me because I know that my self-care, like when I move, when I'm doing movement, I if I do movement, I'm like set. I feel so good for the rest of the day. Like if I jump on my trampoline or I do like a yoga class or, I work out, like exercise and movement is key to me, dancing, like all that stuff. And so I have this like self-sabotaging behavior sometimes that like I keep myself from doing that. So you'll never find that in my Google searches, right?
Oh.
You'll never find me searching for that stuff because it's within me. It's like I can give myself that, but
Mm.
the things that I tend to procrastinate with are like more like I really love design and like how can we make my house better and more beautiful? And when I worked with, when I worked with a coach, that was beauty was one of the first things
Yeah.
that came up as my strengths. Like
Yeah.
I just love to be surrounded by beauty. And so
Yeah.
I'm always looking at ways that I can like make my home more beautiful or like, shopping, I don't really shop for clothes as much as I used to, but like looking for something to wear or looking for something, that's kind of where my little um
That's where your joy comes from,
that's
is what
where my
you're.
joy comes from, like just like like beauty, like I'll look at places that I want to visit or like a vacation, like that kind of thing, like
Right.
Bora Bora, like that kind of-
Right.
you know
Well,
but the self-care part of it, the movement, I tend to like self-sabotage and sometimes I know that if I were to move right now I would feel so much better, but I don't give myself that, and that's kind of when I think about it, I'm like that blows my mind.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's important with the idea of beauty to really validate that and say, you know, in this world, we could also say it's frivolous or that's not necessary or be kind of hard on that part of ourselves. But that totally recharged you. You just had a huge smile on your face when you were just discussing it. So it really, whatever that Google search is for you, it really fills you with something and
Mhm.
it sparks joy. And you may not really ever figure out how to bring it into your life outside of the computer, but if that gives you joy to do that Google search and beautify your home, I mean, there's really nothing more important than feeling good in our space.
Totally, yeah.
That's self-care, totally.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's interesting. I never thought of it that way. So it's like a really new perspective on thinking
Hmm.
about self-care. So I like that.
Yeah.
So tell me, Martha Walker, what is your dream self-care scenario for yourself and how close are you to getting there?
Hmm. And I think what you're asking is what does that look like? How much time and how do I squeeze it into my week?
Yeah, like what's your self-care routine, your dream self-care routine, or like,
Mhm.
are you living it? Are you living the dream? And if you're not living the, because you're my self-care idol, because I really look up to the fact that you give yourself the things that you need and you're very diligent. And I know because you have to, because you feel, like that makes you feel better. And I know that's,
Mhm.
so many of us don't do that for ourselves.
Mhm.
So
I would say I'm probably 80% there, and I'm always tweaking it because for me, I'm a Cancer, so I can be very moody. I know I tell you that all the time and you laugh, but I feel like it changes with the seasons what the self care looks like. So it feels like an oxymoron, but right now in the winter, I've been challenging myself in January to get up at 6 and bounce on my trampoline. You and I have been gushing over our trampolines recently. So I spend about an hour in the morning jumping on the trampoline. I do oil pull and I do dry brush, but that's because I know that I'm someone who doesn't detox easily and my lymphatic system really needs that boost. So I'll just go full disclosure here. In December, I was waking up and drinking a lot of caffeine at 6 and sort of mindlessly scrolling through Facebook. And I love New Year's. I love the chance to say, how could I be better? And so when New Year's Day came, I was like, that's a terrible habit and I need to clean that shit up. So on January 1st, I started getting up at 6, not looking at my phone, jumping on the trampoline, maybe just for 10 minutes, but it sort of depends on what kind of workouts I have coming through the day. And I've really shifted that morning time, and it really does shift my whole day. And then in addition to that sort of daily morning boost, um, once a week, I really take time just to spend a day in my house. And this has been a really hard thing with COVID because I know that I recharge being alone in my house. And I haven't been alone in my house since March. But we have enough space, and my family sort of knows now not to bother mommy when she's in the basement. I still have some things. The 20% that I haven't accomplished for self-care is, I'm missing some vacation time, some time outside of my scheduled life due to COVID. And I'm still always tweaking my work schedule. I like to use the word curate. I'm trying to curate my work schedule to be perfect for me because I really have more energy in the morning than I do at night. And for anyone listening, I also hear from clients all the time that they aren't a morning person. And so your time of day could be nighttime. You don't have to do these things in the morning just because I said it. I happen to be a morning person. If you catch me, I would never oil pull at 6 o'clock at night because I'm like winding down for sleep. But I just want to give everybody out there the freedom in case you hear people like me saying morning. It doesn't have to be in the morning. I think half of the battle here is just figuring out what time of day can I squeeze it in and what time of day would be the best for me.
Yep, I hear
Yeah.
you. For me, if I don't do it in the morning, it's likely not going to get done. So
Yeah.
I don't necessarily know that I'm a morning person.
Mhm.
It's just my
Mhm.
time of day where I can escape my family and they're still asleep and I have the
Definitely.
house to myself.
Right.
So that is like my important time for me because otherwise, like I said, I get home from work and there's no chance I'm gonna get it done at night, really. I mean, I've done it several times. I mean, there've been some times where I'll actually just like wake up in the morning with my workout clothes on. I'll go to bed with my workout clothes on so that I could
We
just,
have definitely we have definitely had that conversation.
I know it sounds kind of crazy, but sometimes that's the way I got to get it done. So
Sometimes it's the way to do it. Yeah. Otherwise, you're stumbling around in the dark trying to find your leggings. Yeah. I agree with that.
totally. Well, I could talk to you for hours about this. This is like really amazing. How do people get in touch with you? Where do you have a website?
My website is www.eatsleepplaymeditate.com.
Very good. So if anyone's interested in working with Martha or talking to Martha more about how she can help you, feel free to reach out to her. And she's in our group here too. So you can, reach out to her that way as well.
Probably from the whole community to you, thanks for leading us and helping us dive into all these wonderful topics.
My pleasure. And, like I said, it helps me as well to hear all these ideas about self-care and, um, I don't always practice what I preach. I'm human. I
Yep.
have my flaws. So all of this talk is helping me as well, helping me to help you and, helping our community grow. So, yeah, thank you for interviewing with me. And I look forward to more conversations.